Lieutenant Sarah Hawk. Jefferson's boots clicked softly against the metal floor of the hangar as she completed her pre-flight inspection. Every panel, every switch, every wire was a note in the symphony of safety she had memorized years ago. At 29, she was known for her precision. Her colleagues admired her, some feared her, but everyone respected the way she could keep calm when chaos threatened to take over. Today was supposed to be routine, a cargo flight from Denver to Dallas, a standard run she had completed dozens of times. But Sarah had learned long ago that the skis were never as predictable as a checklist. Her co-pilot, a rookie named Marcus, fidgeted beside her, fumbling with the throttle. "First time in this type of aircraft?" she asked, trying to mask her irritation. Marcus nodded nervously, cheeks flushed under his flight helmet. "I've read the manuals, Lieutenant," he said, voice tight. I've never actually flown it fully loaded." Sarah gave him a tight smile, more reassuring than friendly. "Don't worry, just follow my lead and we'll get everyone there safely." Her eyes drifted toward the passengers boarding through the jetway, a mix of business travelers, families, and a few vacationers clutching carry-on bags. A little girl waved at her mother while balancing a stuffed rabbit on her shoulder. A man in a suit scrolled frantically through his phone, oblivious to the world. Everyone seemed so calm, so ordinary. Ordinary, she thought bitterly, until it is. The engines roared to life with a familiar vibration, and she felt the aircraft shake with energy, a beast straining against the bonds of the ground. Marcus's hands trembled slightly on the yoke. Sarah's gaze hardened. She had no patience for fear, only focus. Every system reading was within expected parameters. Fuel, hydraulics, communications, all green. She performed her final checks, voice clipped and precise, until the tower cleared them for takeoff. The first minutes of flight passed uneventfully. The plane climbed steadily, slicing through thin clouds with ease. Sarah adjusted the throttle, scanning the instruments. Below, the city of Denver shrank into a patchwork of streets, highways, and scattered lights. Passengers murmured quietly. Some slept, some read, some gazed at the patchwork of clouds below. Even the rookie seemed to be settling into the rhythm. Then, without warning, a shudder ran through the fuselage. A low, metallic groan reverberated through the cabin. Marcus's eyes widened. "Did you feel that?" Sarah's jaw tightened. She flicked a glance at the engine gauges. Both engines registered minor fluctuations, momentary dips that should have corrected automatically, except they hadn't. "Check the auxiliary systems," she instructed calmly, though her heart thudded against her ribs. Her voice, steady as a metronome, masked the pulse racing inside her. Marcus fumbled with the switches, pressing buttons, toggling dials, muttering apologies under his breath. A passenger in the back cried out, "What's happening?" "Nothing you can't handle," Sarah said, though she didn't quite believe it herself. The shudder came again, stronger this time, accompanied by a harsh screech from the engines. Her mind raced. Minor glitches could become catastrophic in seconds at 30,000 feet. She ran through scenarios: electrical failure, bird strike, fuel contamination, mechanical sabotage. Her instincts screamed that this wasn't an ordinary malfunction. There was a rhythm to engine failure, and the rhythm was deliberate, intentional. Marcus's voice cracked. "Lieutenant, I don't know what's going on." "Then we find out and we fix it," she replied. Her eyes scanned every gauge, every readout, her mind moving faster than the plane. A sudden shrill alarm screamed from the cockpit console, cutting through the hum of the engines. Engine 1 failing." Sarah's stomach dropped. Passengers' screams began to echo through the cabin. She took a deep breath, muscles coiling with tension. There were protocols for engine failure, procedures, manuals, simulations, but this was real altitude, real lives, and one critical difference: both engines were now showing signs of catastrophic failure. Through the cabin intercom, a trembling voice spoke, barely audible over the commotion. "The engines, they're losing power." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She recognized that tone, the voice of someone who knew enough to panic but not enough to act. Her mind flipped through emergency checklists, abort procedures, and emergency landings. Somewhere, deep inside her, a calm voice whispered, "This is what you trained for." Then came movement, a flash of urgency. A teenage boy bolted down the aisle, eyes wide, arms flailing. He ignored the frightened cries of passengers, pushed past flight attendants trying to restore order, and reached the cockpit. "Please," he gasped, "help us." Sarah barely had time to register him before the plane lurched violently, tossed by turbulence that seemed to come from nowhere. Her hands gripped the controls, thumbs pressed to buttons and switches that could mean life or death. She adjusted the throttle, tried to stabilize the craft, but the engines groaned like wounded animals. She glanced at Marcus, whose face had drained of color. "Stay with me, I need you focused." He nodded, sweat beading his forehead, lips trembling. Sarah's eyes flicked outside. The horizon stretched endlessly, a deceptive calm hiding the storm of danger beneath. Clouds, once innocent and fluffy, now looked like jagged teeth waiting to tear the plane apart. The aircraft shuddered again, throwing the teenage boy against the bulkhead. Passengers screamed, clutched seats, and prayed. Sarah's mind was a whirl of calculations. Altitude, airspeed, descent trajectory, landing sites, emergency runways, any open field. She could see the winding highways below, the patchwork of forests, the sudden glint of water reflecting sunlight. It was a cruel beauty, too calm for the chaos unfolding inside her cockpit. And then came the thought that made her stomach twist. This isn't random. This isn't a malfunction. Her instincts screamed at her. Someone or something was manipulating the engines. Sabotage, terrorism, or something she couldn't name yet. Her fingers moved with precision honed over a decade of training, but her mind raced ahead, anticipating scenarios her instruments couldn't reveal. She glanced at the young boy. Terror and trust warred in his eyes. He had put his life in her hands without hesitation. Somewhere deep inside, she realized the responsibility was now absolute. No manuals, no protocols, no rookie co-pilot could save this plane. Only her, only Hawk. And as the plane quivered, teetering on the edge between control and catastrophe, Sarah made a choice. She would fight. She would survive. She would save them all or die trying. Suspense hook. Who or what was sabotaging the flight? And could Sarah's skill and experience be enough to prevent a disaster 30,000 feet in the air? The groan of the engines was no longer a warning. It was a scream. Both turbines shuddered violently as the plane pitched downward, twisting like a wounded hawk caught in a storm. Sarah Hawk Jefferson's knuckles whitened on the controls. She could feel the aircraft fighting her every command. Alarms blared incessantly, lights strobing red in the cockpit, while the intercom crackled with terrified passengers' screams. Marcus's voice quavered over the roar. "Lieutenant, I can't stabilize it." "You can," Sarah barked, her tone sharp but controlled. Every fiber of her being screamed focus, discipline, survival. She had faced impossible odds before, but never with 174 strangers' lives dependent on her split-second decisions. One wrong move, and the aircraft would become a plummeting tomb. From the cabin behind her came another scream. A mother clutched her crying baby while trying to protect an older child. The boy she had noticed in the aisle earlier, no more than 15, his eyes wide, hair plastered to his forehead, was clutching the side of the cockpit door. "Please," he shouted, desperation raw in his voice. "You have to save us." Sarah's stomach twisted. He wasn't just asking her to fly, he was demanding she perform a miracle. And for the first time she allowed herself a flicker of doubt, not in her skills but in the odds. The turbulence was relentless, the engines failing in a pattern that didn't make sense. Someone or something was deliberately pushing them to the edge. Marcus attempted to adjust the throttles again, but the controls responded sluggishly. Sarah leaned over, overriding him with a swift press of her palm. Every instrument was screaming a warning. Altitude dropping, vertical speed increasing, airspeed fluctuating dangerously. The altimeter, like a countdown clock, ticked down toward disaster. She had to act fast. Her eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any possible escape. Somewhere below, beyond the clouds, there might be a clearing, a field, a road, an airstrip. But from 30,000 feet, the earth was a patchwork of shapes, none guaranteed to save them. Then the boy yelled again. "The engines, they're dead. You have to do something now." Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline that made her heart pound in her ears. This isn't a simulation. There's no instructor to correct your mistakes. No one can save them but you. Her hands flew over the controls, running emergency protocols she had drilled into muscle memory. She tried to restart the engine's alternate fuel lines, switch to backup systems. Each attempt was met with a shudder, a groan, a spark flashing on the panel. Through the chaos, she made one cold calculation. She could attempt a controlled emergency descent. It was risky. The plane might not survive, but it offered the only chance for the passengers. "Marcus," she shouted over the alarms, "we're going down. Steady, slow, follow my lead." The co-pilot nodded, sweat stinging his eyes. "Yes, Lieutenant." Sarah took a deep, shuddering breath. She banked the plane slightly, angling toward what looked like an open stretch of farmland below. The fuselage screamed in protest. Turbulence tore through the cabin, tossing passengers into each other, overhead bins flinging contents like confetti. A flight attendant yelled, "Brace! Brace!" But the command barely registered over the sound of metal and wind. The boy remained by the cockpit door, clinging with white-knuckled desperation. His gaze never left her. Somehow, in his fear, he had placed an unspoken trust in her hands. And Sarah, for all her training, felt a pang of protectiveness she hadn't expected. She wasn't just a pilot now, she was a guardian. Time stretched. Seconds felt like minutes, minutes like hours. Her mind moved faster than any humans could, calculating descent angles, airspeed, wind shear, and engine failure probabilities. Each decision had immediate consequences. Tilt too much, the fuselage could tear apart. Descend too fast, the landing would be fatal. Too slow, and they would stall. Through the chaos, a subtle movement in the clouds caught her eye. A glint of something sleek, fast, deliberate. She blinked. F-22s, military-grade aircraft cutting through the sky with precision that made her stomach tighten. They weren't just observers, they were hunters or protectors or maybe both. Her mind raced. Who sent them? Why now? But there was no time to dwell. She needed to keep the plane from tearing itself apart. With the co-pilot assisting, she began a series of maneuvers that made her heart ache with fear. Every bank, every tilt, every throttle adjustment was calculated to keep the plane airborne for just long enough to reach the ground, or whatever approximated it. The passengers were panicked, crying, praying, some frozen in terror. A mother held a baby to her chest while whispering, "It's going to be okay." Sarah wanted to tell her they were safe, but she didn't know that herself. She couldn't lie, even to comfort them. As the plane dropped lower, turbulence clawed at the wings. Birds scattered from the fields below, startled into frantic flight. The engines groaned again, sputtering like wounded creatures. The altimeter ticked toward 10,000 feet. Every system flickered unpredictably. The boy shouted again, voice cracking, "We're going to die. We're all going to die." Sarah's stomach sank, but she didn't let panic reach her voice. She leaned closer to the controls. "No," she said firmly, eyes locked on the horizon. "Not today, we fight. We survive, trust me." Her hands moved like lightning, alternating flaps, rudder, and throttle adjustments. The plane groaned and shook, but it remained in the air. Below, a narrow ribbon of a rural airstrip appeared, framed by fields and bordered by forest. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't wide, it wasn't long, and the surface looked uneven. But it was hope. She aligned the aircraft as best she could, banking slightly to match the approach. The co-pilot fumbled with landing gear, sweat pouring down his face. The boy held onto the cockpit wall, white knuckles gripping metal. Around them, the cabin was a storm of chaos. Luggage shifting, passengers screaming, infants crying, but all eyes were riveted on the miracle unfolding above. Sarah allowed herself only a fraction of a second to notice the F-22s keeping pace with her descent, their presence both reassuring and terrifying. They mirrored her moves, cutting the wind, clearing the turbulence she couldn't control. But they didn't intervene directly. This was her fight. The plane shuddered violently as they approached the ground. She adjusted the angle, keeping the fuselage steady, trying to avoid trees that scraped the wingtips. Dust and debris flew from the fields below. The engines coughed and screamed. Every passenger braced, hearts hammering. Marcus whispered, voice trembling, "We're going to make it, are we?" Sarah didn't answer. There was no promise she could make, only control, only skill, only willpower. And as the plane edged closer to the patch of land that might save them, she realized the truth. This was no ordinary emergency. Whoever, or whatever, had compromised the engines had underestimated the one person capable of fighting back. Hawk. The horizon twisted beneath Sarah, Hawk, Jefferson's gaze like a living map of danger. The rural airstrip, a narrow ribbon of hope surrounded by fields and jagged tree lines, seemed impossibly small from 30,000 feet. Her heart pounded, adrenaline hammering through her veins. The plane groaned with every breath, each shudder threatening to rip it apart. Both engines were on the brink of complete failure. Every passenger's life hung on her decisions, her skill, her instinct. Marcus, pale as the clouds above, fumbled beside her. "Lieutenant, we can't slow down. We're too high. We're—" His voice broke as the plane bucked violently, tossing him against his harness. "Focus," Sarah snapped, overriding him with precise movements. "We don't have the luxury of panic." Her hands danced across the throttle and control yokes, her every motion a calculated defiance of gravity and logic. The boy from the aisle had climbed to the cockpit again, somehow managing to cling to the frame as the plane tilted violently. His eyes were wide with terror, yet there was trust there, raw and desperate. "Please, you can do this, right?" he shouted. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. The flight instruments, the engine monitors, the artificial horizon, they all demanded her full attention. Each calculation had to be perfect. Descent speed, angle, flap adjustment, wind shear, airspeed, crosswinds, and the unpredictable turbulence from the failing engines. One mistake and the fuselage would crumple. One miscalculation and the plane would become a projectile of death. Below, the narrow airstrip stretched like a promise too fragile to trust. Trees loomed on both sides, fences crumpled in fields, and the surface was uneven, dotted with loose gravel. Landing here required more than skill. It required intuition, instinct honed over countless missions she had flown in secret, missions that the world would never know. Then in the clouds ahead, a glint of metal appeared, the F-22s, sleek and menacing, tracking her descent. They weren't attacking, but their presence made the impossible feel even more intense. Years ago, Sarah had flown alongside them during covert exercises in the Pacific, but those had been controlled simulations. This was different. She couldn't rely on them for direct assistance. Their silent observation was a reminder of what she was capable of and what they expected her to accomplish. She adjusted the flaps, banking the plane in a controlled spiral to align with the strip. The aircraft shuddered violently, the fuselage straining as though aware of the limits it was being pushed to. Each passenger clung to the seat in front of them. Some screamed, some cried, and some whispered frantic prayers. "Brace," a flight attendant yelled, grabbing the nearest overhead bins to steady herself. The boy clutched the side of the cockpit frame, white-knuckled, whispering, "You can do this, you have to." Sarah felt a surge of determination. "I am Hawk," she thought, the call sign resonating through her very core. "I have survived worse. I have faced impossible odds. I can do this." Sweat streamed down her face, mixing with the fine hairs plastered to her forehead by the wind gusts and sudden movements. Her eyes darted from the horizon to the airspeed indicator, then to the altimeter. The plane was dropping faster than she wanted, but she had just enough altitude to attempt a controlled approach. She took a deep breath, steadying her shaking hands. "Marcus, keep the throttle steady. I need precise speed control." He nodded, voice tight. "Yes, Lieutenant." The plane tilted sharply to avoid an unseen gust, nearly scraping the treetops. A collective scream rose from the passengers as the wingtip grazed branches, snapping some and sending them skittering across the fuselage. Sarah's stomach lurched, but she forced her hands to stay steady. Every instinct screamed danger, every fiber of her training screamed calculation. She could not fail. The F-22s mirrored her movements now, slicing through the clouds with precision, their proximity both unnerving and reassuring. She remembered the drills from her Top Gun training, where synchronization and split-second timing saved lives, or failed miserably. These pilots had been her mentors, her peers, her competition. And now they were witnesses to her fight, silent yet ever-present, measuring her skill. Sarah calculated the landing like a chess grandmaster in a storm. Flaps adjusted, landing gear deployed, speed fine-tuned, and angle of descent executed with surgical precision. She was threading a needle in a hurricane. The plane groaned, wings flexing, fuselage trembling. Every nerve screamed pain, every muscle tightened with stress. Passengers braced. A child clutched a stuffed rabbit, staring at the cockpit in awe and fear. The mother behind him whispered, "It's okay, honey, it's okay." The plane's tires kissed the uneven airstrip with a violent screech. Gravel sprayed. Dust billowed. The fuselage shuddered like it would collapse at any moment, but it held. Sarah applied the brakes with all the strength she could muster, each second a battle against momentum, gravity, and failing systems. Marcus shouted, we're slowing." "Yes," she whispered, teeth gritted. "Hold it together." The plane wobbled violently, scraping the ground in places where the strip had crumbled, but Sarah corrected with delicate, impossible adjustments. The runway ended too soon. Trees approached fast. She leaned forward, pressing every ounce of knowledge, instinct, and courage into the controls. With a final, violent shudder, the plane came to a trembling stop just short of disaster. The cabin erupted into a mix of relieved screams and sobs. Passengers were shaking, clinging to each other, some in disbelief that they were alive. The boy who had run to the cockpit was trembling, tears streaking his face. Sarah glanced at him. He looked at her with awe, as though she were some mythic figure descended from legend to save them. But Sarah's focus had already shifted. She could see the F-22s descending now, their engines cutting through the air like predators. Their pilots had removed their helmets, and eyes wide, they stared at the miracle that had just unfolded. Sarah unstrapped herself, hands shaking as she swung open the cockpit door. The wind hit her like a wall and she stumbled slightly, gripping the frame. Marcus collapsed in relief, his face pale, sweat soaking his uniform. The boy ran to her side. You saved everyone," he whispered. "Yes," she said, voice hoarse, "but we're not out of the woods yet." Above them the F-22s hovered, almost ceremonious, yet their presence was a reminder. Someone, or something, had set this disaster in motion. And now someone knew her call sign, someone who recognized her. Sarah's eyes hardened. Her mind, still racing, realized the truth. The emergency had been more than an accident. The engines hadn't failed on their own. This had been deliberate. And the F-22s, the unexpected observers, were no random coincidence. Her stomach tightened as a chilling thought struck. They know me. And what they know could change everything. The rural airstrip was chaos incarnate. Dust swirled in the evening sun, kicked up by the plane's braking, while passengers scrambled out of their seats, some sobbing, some hugging their children, some staring blankly at the ground in disbelief that they were alive. Emergency crews were rushing forward, but all attention gravitated toward the cockpit door, where Sarah Hawk Jefferson stood, sweat-soaked, uniform torn, breathing hard. Her eyes scanned the horizon even as adrenaline gradually ebbed. Above, the F-22s hovered with an eerie precision, their sleek silhouettes cutting through the sky. For a moment, Sarah thought they might attack, but instead they mirrored her position, engines idling, silent yet dominant. Her stomach tightened. Something about their presence was familiar, too familiar. Marcus, still trembling, muttered, "Lieutenant, who are they?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. Her mind raced. The F-22 pilots weren't random interceptors. She had trained with them, fought beside them, and sometimes against them during Top Gun exercises that were classified even from most of the military. Recognition. It was instant, visceral, and chilling. She reached for the radio, heart hammering. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Hawk. I repeat, Hawk. Emergency landing completed at Airstrip 942. Static, then a voice, calm, deliberate, chillingly familiar, cracked through the line. "Hawk, is that really you?" Sarah froze. Her pulse quickened. The voice belonged to Captain Lucas Viper Kane, one of her old Top Gun mentors and one of the most respected F-22 pilots in the country. He had trained her in the Pacific during top-secret intercepts, teaching her to push aircraft beyond their known limits. He had been feared, respected, and almost legendary. "Yes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper though steady. "It's me." There was a pause on the line, and then the voice softened, tinged with awe. "We thought you were gone, Hawk, we thought." Sarah's stomach twisted. The memory of missions gone wrong, operations so classified she could never speak of them, came flooding back. Disappearances, intelligence failures, high-altitude intercepts, all the things that had made her a legend in secret circles, flashed behind her eyes. And now those ghosts had found her in a civilian plane, in a life-threatening emergency. "Why are you here?" she asked, her tone steady, though suspicion ran like ice through her veins. "Observing," Kane replied tersely. "We received intelligence of a potential engine sabotage on a commercial flight, and then, when your call sign appeared on the transponder," his voice dropped to a whisper, "we had to make sure it was really you." Sarah's stomach sank. Someone had not only tampered with the engines, but also deliberately triggered a chain of events that drew out one of the military's most classified pilots, her. Someone knew who Hawk was. Marcus stammered beside her, They know you." "Yes," Sarah said, voice cold. She looked at the boy who still clutched the cockpit door frame. "And now, everyone on this plane is connected to whatever this is. We're not safe yet." The boy blinked, fear flickering in his eyes. Why do they know you?" Sarah wanted to say it was complicated, that it involved years of secret missions, classified exercises, and covert operations. But the words felt heavy, dangerous, inappropriate in front of innocent civilians. She took a deep breath. "Some secrets are meant to stay that way, but right now you have to trust me." She turned back to the F-22s. The pilots had landed their jets on nearby strips, keeping their distance but observing her with intensity that made her stomach tight. She recognized the call signs flashing on their dashboards: Viper, Falcon, Ghost, her former wingmen. Each of them had trained for extreme scenarios, for missions where split-second decisions meant life or death. And now here they were, outside their controlled environment, tracking her every move. The wind gusted across the strip, ruffling uniforms and hair, carrying the sound of engines idling and passengers whispering prayers of thanks. But Sarah's mind remained in high gear. She scanned the plane systems again. Though the engines had stabilized, she knew the sabotage could be more extensive than she realized. Electrical systems, hydraulics, fuel lines, anyone could fail again if the perpetrator wanted. She had survived landing once. Survival now would require answers and action. One of the F-22 pilots finally broke radio silence again. "Hawk, you need to report to base immediately. There's intel you need to see. We'll explain in person." Sarah clenched her jaw. Going to base wasn't an option, not yet. The passengers were still shaken. Children were crying. Families were clinging together. She couldn't just leave them in this field while she chased some secret intelligence warning. Her duty was still here, among these strangers whose lives had been hanging by a thread. She exhaled, gripping the edge of the cockpit frame. "Tell me exactly what you know," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. Kane's voice softened, tinged with respect. Hawk, this isn't just a mechanical failure. We intercepted chatter that someone with military-grade knowledge may have intentionally targeted a civilian flight. And when your call sign appeared, he paused. We had to confirm it wasn't a trap. Sarah's stomach dropped. A trap. Yes, he said. They knew who you were. They may have known you'd be on a civilian flight. Someone wanted to see if you could survive it. Her mind raced. Who could have orchestrated this? And why? Someone had engineered the perfect test, forcing her to land a failing plane with passengers at risk, then drawing her out with recognition and surveillance. It was calculated, precise, almost personal. Marcus shivered beside her. Lieutenant, why would anyone target you like this? Sarah's gaze hardened. She remembered missions where enemies had underestimated her skill, where they thought they could manipulate her or catch her off guard. But this was different. It wasn't combat. It was real life, civilians involved, stakes she couldn't mitigate with firepower or evasive maneuvers. This was cruelty masquerading as a challenge. Kane's voice crackled again over the radio. Hawk will guide you, but you need to move the plane to a secure area immediately. Do not, under any circumstances, let the engines idle here too long. It's still unstable. Sarah nodded, already moving toward action. She had saved the flight once. Now she needed to safeguard the evidence, protect the passengers, and uncover who had set this in motion. Every instinct screamed that the answers lay beyond this airstrip, with the F-22s providing both cover and intelligence. She glanced at the boy again. His eyes were wide with awe, tinged with lingering fear. "You're really a hero, aren't you?" he whispered. Sarah offered a faint smile, though her mind was already racing ahead. "I'm just doing my job," she said, but even to herself it sounded hollow. "My job isn't done yet, and if they know me, it never will be." As the F-22s moved in formation, engines slicing the air, Sarah realized the truth. Her past had returned, unbidden, in a civilian disaster that almost killed everyone on board. And the world, until now blissfully unaware of Hawk's legendary legacy, was about to be forced to recognize it, whether she was ready or not. Sarah Hawk Jefferson stood on the dusty airstrip, chest heaving, sweat streaming down her face, adrenaline still thrumming like a live wire in her veins. Around her, passengers were beginning to grasp the reality. They were alive. Mothers hugged their children tighter, couples clutched each other, and the boy who had run to the cockpit just moments ago trembled with awe and relief. Yet none of it could calm the storm raging inside her mind. The F-22s hovered nearby, engines humming with quiet authority. One of the pilots, Captain Lucas Viper Kane, disembarked with his helmet tucked under his arm, eyes fixed on her. His gaze was a mixture of relief, awe, and something else, respect tinged with incredulity. The other pilots, equally familiar, followed, their movements precise, professional, yet alert, scanning the perimeter as if danger could erupt from the earth itself. Sarah's pulse slowed only slightly, but her mind was a whirlwind of calculations, memories, and fears. She glanced back at the plane, now stabilized and cooling in the warm sunlight. The engines, though temporarily still, were a reminder of how close they had come to catastrophe. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, letting memories wash over her unbidden. Nevada, midnight. Top Gun exercises in near-total darkness. She had been a young, ambitious pilot then, fearless, reckless, constantly pushing aircraft and herself to their absolute limits. She remembered the roar of jet engines cutting through night skis, the burn of afterburners, the thrill of outmaneuvering the fastest planes in the fleet. Every drill, every mission, had honed her into the pilot she was today, but it had also left a shadowed past she had carefully tucked away. One particular flashback struck her with force. A covert operation in the Pacific, a high-speed intercept where an enemy craft had locked onto her squadron. The simulation had become real when a mechanical failure almost cost her life. Yet she had prevailed, her call sign, Hawk, earning whispered reverence among the most elite military operatives. She had become a ghost in classified operations, legendary to those who knew her, anonymous to the world at large. And now, standing on this rural airstrip, the past was colliding with the present. The F-22 pilots weren't just here by coincidence. They knew her. They had recognized her call sign instantly. It was a signal that she had been found, that her past, which she had thought safely buried, was no longer a secret. "Lieutenant Jefferson," Kane's voice broke through her reverie, "we need to talk now." She opened her eyes, nodding sharply. Her gaze swept the airstrip, ensuring the passengers were safe. The boy, still clutching his rabbit, glanced at her and whispered, "Are we going to be okay?" Sarah crouched slightly to meet his eyes, forcing a calm she didn't feel. "Yes," she said firmly, "you're safe, but we need to move quickly. There are things you don't understand yet, and I need to protect you from them." Her voice carried authority, but internally she was churning with questions. Who had tampered with the engines? How had they known she would be aboard this flight? And why had her call sign provoked such a swift response from the elite pilots above? The past intruded again, sharper this time. Training exercises, simulated sabotage, covert strikes, missions so secret that even her own family didn't know her involvement. She remembered the whispered warnings of her mentors: never reveal Hawk, never let anyone know what you can do. Yet here, in broad daylight in the middle of nowhere, her identity had been revealed to those who mattered most, and those who might now be hunting her. Kane stepped closer, his expression tight with concern. "We intercepted chatter about a potential sabotage. When your call sign appeared, we had to make sure it was really you, Hawk." His voice faltered slightly. "We didn't know if we'd find you alive." Sarah swallowed hard. Her stomach churned with a mix of relief and dread. She had survived countless missions, faced enemy fighters, mechanical failures, and hostile skis. But the knowledge that someone had orchestrated this scenario deliberately, in a civilian setting, raised the stakes exponentially. Marcus, still trembling beside her, whispered, "Lieutenant, they all know you." "Yes," Sarah said, her voice low and controlled. "And now we have to figure out why someone wanted to test me in this way. Who would risk civilian lives just to see if I could survive?" The boy tugged at her sleeve. Are you a soldier?" His voice was small, uncertain. Sarah crouched again, meeting his eyes. "I used to be," she said, carefully choosing her words. "I was trained to protect people, to survive in situations nobody else could. But right now, my job is here with you all." Her gaze swept the airstrip again. Emergency crews were beginning to check the plane and tend to passengers, but she noticed something troubling. Faint traces of foreign devices near the engine compartments, small indicators of tampering that had gone unnoticed in the initial landing. Someone had been precise, calculated, and almost surgical in their sabotage. Kane's voice broke her observation. "Lieutenant, we need to move the plane to a secure area. The sabotage could be more extensive than you think." And he hesitated, his gaze flickering toward the horizon. "They're watching. Whoever did this, they may still be tracking you." Sarah's stomach tightened. She had survived impossible odds before, but the idea that someone had orchestrated this event, then observed it remotely, sent a cold wave of unease down her spine. This was no longer a simple emergency landing. This was a trap, and she had just walked into the center of it. Her thoughts flashed again to the boy, to the passengers, to Marcus. She couldn't leave them exposed. She couldn't let fear dictate her next moves. Every instinct screamed vigilance, every training drilled her focus. Hawk didn't freeze under pressure. Hawk calculated, adapted, and struck back. Her hands moved over the plane's controls again, running checks on the systems that had stabilized but were still fragile. The sabotage wasn't over. The engines could fail again at any moment. Hydraulic lines, fuel systems, electrical circuits, they were all vulnerable. One misstep, one hidden device, and the lives of everyone on board could be lost. Kane's voice cut through her concentration again. "Lieutenant, we're ready to escort you. We can provide cover and secure the area while you assess the damage. But you need to trust us. This is bigger than just a plain failure." Sarah's jaw tightened. She glanced at the boy, at Marcus, and at the passengers still processing the trauma. She realized the truth. Survival alone wasn't enough. They were already enmeshed in something far larger, something that could endanger them all. She exhaled a long, measured breath and nodded. "All right, we move. But no one leaves this strip until I confirm it's safe." Kane's eyes softened, a rare display of emotion from the hardened pilot. "Understood, Hawk. Follow our lead." As the F-22s repositioned to escort the plane, Sarah's mind raced with every possible scenario, every contingency plan she had ever trained for. Her past, her secret identity as Hawk, had collided with her present civilian life in a way that threatened not just her, but everyone around her. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like lead. She had saved lives once. She would have to do it again. But this time the enemy was invisible, the stakes were higher, and the secret she had carried for years had suddenly become the key to survival. Dust and gravel swirled around the plane as Sarah Hawk Jefferson prepared for the next phase of the crisis. Her hands moved over the controls with mechanical precision, each adjustment deliberate, every motion a testament to years of training in extreme, high-stakes environments. The plane, though safely on the rudimentary strip, was still vulnerable. Every system, from hydraulics to fuel lines, was a potential ticking time bomb. "Captain Lucas Viper," Kane's voice came over the comms, crisp but tinged with urgency. "Hawk, we're ready to escort. Move the aircraft to the secondary secure airstrip 3 miles northeast. Minimal exposure, clear perimeter. We'll cover your descent." Sarah's jaw tightened. Secondary airstrip. That meant more precise maneuvering, tighter margins. The narrow, uneven landing strips they had trained on during Top Gun exercises had prepared her for controlled chaos, but this was different. This was real. Passengers were still on board. Innocent lives were still at risk. And someone somewhere had deliberately sabotaged her plane once before. Could she risk moving it again? "Understood," she said, fingers flying over the throttle. "We're moving now." The plane lurched as she lifted it slightly off the ground, clearing the immediate obstacles, trees, fencing, and uneven terrain. Dust clouds obscured visibility and gravel sprayed from the wheels like a storm of tiny missiles. The passengers clutched seats, some shrieking, others silent in disbelief. The boy who had run to the cockpit leaned against the door frame, eyes wide, gripping his stuffed rabbit like a talisman. Marcus adjusted beside her, pale but attentive. "Lieutenant, the engines are stable for now," he whispered. "Stable doesn't mean safe," she replied sharply, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement or interference. Her eyes flicked to the F-22s slicing through the sky above. Their sleek silhouettes glinted in the sunlight, eerily beautiful, predatory. One by one, they mirrored her maneuvers, engines roaring with authority, creating a protective corridor through which she could navigate. Sarah leaned into the controls, banking the plane slightly to align with the secondary strip. The fuselage groaned under the stress, wings flexing as though testing her willpower. She recalled years of Top Gun drills, where split-second adjustments and high-speed intercepts had been the difference between life and death. Now she relied on that training, not in simulations, not in exercises, but in reality, with civilians on board, with enemies unseen, with sabotage lurking in every electrical reading. She could feel her pulse hammering in her temples as she adjusted flaps and rudder. The plane responded sluggishly. A subtle stutter ran through the engine indicators. Her mind immediately calculated contingency maneuvers. If the engines faltered again, she had less than 30 seconds to execute an emergency glide and attempt a forced landing. She refused to let that happen. The F-22 pilots maintained formation, but she noticed subtle changes in their behavior. One jet broke slightly from formation, approaching from a sharper angle. Viper's voice crackled again. "Hawk, they're testing our perimeter. Unknown craft detected at 12 o'clock. Maintain course, do not engage. Just keep control of the civilian aircraft." Her stomach tightened. Unknown craft. This wasn't just sabotage anymore. Someone or multiple parties was monitoring, manipulating, possibly hunting them. The calm precision of her former squadron was a stark contrast to the invisible threat stalking them. "Copy that," she said, voice steady, masking her unease. Every instinct screamed vigilance. Her eyes darted to the horizon, scanning for anomalies, flares, distant glints, signs of tampering, electronic interference. Her fingers danced across the throttle and yoke, micro-adjusting for wind shear, turbulence, and the weight of 174 terrified souls aboard. The boy whispered again, voice trembling, Are we being chased?" Sarah's gaze softened briefly, a flicker of empathy cutting through her professional focus. "We're protected," she said, "but we have to stay alert. We can't assume anything is safe." Marcus's hand shook slightly as he assisted with the controls. "Lieutenant, this is intense. I've never flown under conditions like this." She gave him a tight nod. "Good. Now you know what it feels like to fly when everything depends on you. Remember your training, keep your focus. We're not out of danger yet." The plane banked sharply to align with the approach to the secondary strip. Trees scraped dangerously close, the uneven terrain threatening the landing. Every passenger had to brace for impact, and Sarah felt the weight of their lives like iron chains on her shoulders. She visualized the descent, calculated the glide path, monitored engine responses, and adjusted flaps with surgical precision. The plane groaned but obeyed, inching closer to salvation. Suddenly, another blip appeared on the radar, a small, fast-moving object weaving between the trees toward the strip. Hawk froze for a split second, recognition dawning. Someone was attempting interference. Not an accident, not random, deliberate. "Kane," she barked, voice steady despite the rising adrenaline. "We have an incoming craft, small, fast, heading toward the strip. Advise." Viper's voice was tense. "Unknown, maintain formation. Do not engage unless necessary. We'll intercept if it gets close. You focus on the aircraft." Sarah's pulse surged. Every muscle tightened. She had survived impossible odds in classified missions, but this was different. She wasn't armed. She was responsible for civilians. Every calculation had to be perfect. The plane shuddered again as turbulence hit from an unexpected gust. Dust, debris, and leaves whipped around the cockpit windows. The F-22s responded instantly, creating a protective corridor, their engines roaring like predators marking their territory. Sarah leaned into the yoke, micro-adjusting, countering the pull of wind and gravity. The secondary airstrip, though slightly longer, was bordered by rough terrain and forest, leaving no room for error. She counted down in her head, altitude, distance, velocity. Everything hinged on precision. Her hands moved like an extension of the aircraft itself, instinct overriding fear. Marcus's nervous fumbling was overridden by her subtle commands. She felt the weight of her training, her experience, every mission she had survived in top-secret conditions, flow through her fingers into the plane. The unknown craft loomed closer, weaving between trees with terrifying speed. The F-22s adjusted formation, creating a barrier between it and the civilian plane. Hawk's mind raced. Could it be another test? Or had someone orchestrated a second attempt at sabotage to see if she could survive again? She refused to think about the implications. Now wasn't the time for speculation. Survival required action, precision, and nerves of steel. The plane descended onto the secondary strip. Dust exploded from the wheels and the uneven terrain sent tremors through the fuselage. The engines, strained but still functioning, groaned under the effort. Every passenger was braced, every child's eyes wide with fear. The boy clutched his rabbit, whispering prayers under his breath. Sarah adjusted one final time, using a combination of rudder and throttle to straighten the plane against a gust that threatened to knock it sideways. The landing was rough, almost violent but controlled. The fuselage shuddered and groaned as it rolled along the strip, but it held. They were safe, for now. The F-22s hovered above, engines cutting sharply as they scanned for threats. Hawk exhaled, muscles trembling, sweat dripping into her eyes. The passengers began to breathe again, their sobs and whispered relief filling the air. But Hawk knew better than to relax. Somewhere out there, the force behind the sabotage was still watching, still waiting, still calculating. And they knew who she was. The dust still hung in the air, shimmering in the late afternoon sun, as Sarah Hawk Jefferson swung open the cockpit door. Passengers hesitated, their relief mingling with exhaustion, but most stayed seated, unable to fully comprehend the miracle they had just survived. The boy who had clung to the cockpit door earlier was now huddled against his mother, eyes wide with awe. He kept looking at Sarah, as though expecting her to vanish like some mythic figure. Sarah's gaze, however, was fixed on the F-22s. The pilots were descending, landing on nearby cleared strips with mechanical precision that made her pulse tighten. Each one moved with the discipline of predators, yet there was a distinct human element in their eyes, recognition, respect, and something else she couldn't quite place. Captain Lucas Viper Kane approached first, helmet under his arm, his jaw set, his eyes serious. "Lieutenant Jefferson," he began, voice firm yet quiet, "you just executed a landing that most seasoned pilots wouldn't attempt. You kept 174 people alive, but that's not why we're here." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Then why?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with suspicion. She was still calculating every angle of the situation, running mental checks on the aircraft, on the passengers, on potential threats. Someone had targeted her. Someone had forced this test. She needed answers. Viper exhaled sharply, as if the weight of revealing the truth was heavy. "Because whoever did this knew Hawk was on that flight. They knew your call sign. They knew your reputation. And they wanted to see if you were still capable of surviving under extreme conditions." The words hit her like a punch. "A test," she echoed, disbelief coloring her tone. "You're telling me someone sabotaged a civilian plane just to see if I could handle it?" "Yes," Kane said bluntly. "And that's not all. We intercepted communication suggesting that this isn't over. Whoever orchestrated this event has access to classified military intelligence and knows exactly what you're capable of." Sarah's stomach twisted. Her secret past, the mission she had survived, the operation she had executed under the radar, was no longer a secret. Her call sign, once a code known only among elite pilots, had marked her as a target. Someone had recognized her. Someone had set a trap with precision, daring her to survive and exposing her identity in the process. Her hands tightened on the cockpit frame, knuckles white. She glanced back at the passengers, at the boy, at Marcus. "And they did this to civilians." Viper nodded grimly. "Yes, and they're not finished. We have intelligence suggesting that the enemy behind this has orchestrated other scenarios, traps designed to test the limits of operatives like you. And now, Hawk, you are in their sights." A cold shiver ran down her spine. She had survived impossible odds before, faced mechanical failures, hostile skis, enemy fighters, but never with innocence involved, never with her secret identity exposed in broad daylight. The implications were terrifying. Every step she had taken in life had led to this moment, and now the past and present were colliding in ways she could not ignore. Marcus stepped closer, voice trembling. "Lieutenant, what do we do now? We save the plane, save the people, don't we get a break?" Sarah shook her head slowly. "No, not yet. Not until we know who's behind this and how far they're willing to go. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about stopping someone who thinks they can manipulate, terrorize, and control from the shadows." Viper's expression softened slightly, but his eyes were sharp. "We've arranged a secure facility nearby. It's the only place where we can assess the sabotage, protect the civilians, and debrief you properly. You're not alone in this, Hawk, but you need to trust us. Full cooperation. Do you understand?" Sarah's jaw tightened. Trust wasn't easy, especially with her past, but she had no choice. "Understood," she said. She looked at Marcus, who nodded weakly, understanding the gravity of the situation. The boy's mother stepped forward, a protective arm around her child, eyes wary but trusting. Sarah motioned for everyone to board the plane again, this time for a controlled, escorted flight to the secure location. The F-22s flanked them, engines roaring, creating a protective corridor in the sky. Sarah's hands moved over the controls with renewed focus. Every maneuver was precise, every adjustment calculated. The plane, though stable, remained fragile, a reminder that danger was never far away. As they lifted off, memories of past missions intruded again, sharper this time. Midnight intercepts, simulated sabotage drills, high-speed chases over the Pacific, all exercises designed to push pilots to their absolute limits. Those missions had shaped her into Hawk, a name whispered in respect and fear among elite operatives. And now, that legacy was both a shield and a target. The F-22s maintained formation, keeping a close watch on the surrounding airspace. Viper's voice came over the comms, calm but firm. "Hawk, once we land, you'll need to provide a full assessment of the sabotage. Every detail, every indicator. Whoever did this may have left traces, and we need them to track the source." Sarah nodded, her mind already analyzing possibilities. Small, precise tools could have been used to sabotage engines, electrical interference, fuel line manipulation. Even a subtle mechanical defect could have been exploited. Whoever orchestrated this had deep technical knowledge, and they knew her methods, her instincts, her patterns. The secure facility came into view, a hardened compound hidden in the outskirts of the state, protected by multiple layers of defense and surveillance. The plane descended smoothly, flanked by the F-22s. Hawk's heart remained in high gear. She had survived impossible odds once. She would have to do it again, this time with intelligence, investigation, and strategy. As the wheels touched the tarmac, dust rising around the plane, she caught the boy's gaze once more. He whispered, "You really are a hero." Sarah's lips curved in a faint, weary smile. "We're all heroes when we survive together," she said, though the weight of what was coming settled heavily on her shoulders. The passengers disembarked under supervision, led to a secure reception area. Hawk stayed behind briefly, inspecting the plane with meticulous care. Viper approached, his expression serious. "Hawk, there's something you need to know before the debrief. This isn't just about the sabotage. Whoever did this, they've been watching you for years. They've been testing operatives like you, and you're at the center of their game." Sarah felt a chill. Years of covert operations, missions thought long behind her, were resurfacing in ways she had never imagined. Someone had taken her legacy, her identity as Hawk, and weaponized it. And now, she was forced to confront it, not as a pilot executing maneuvers, but as a target in a deadly game she couldn't afford to lose. The secure facility loomed like a fortress against the horizon, its reinforced walls and guarded gates promising safety, yet doing little to quell the storm raging inside Sarah Hawk Jefferson. She stepped off the plane, every muscle still tense, every nerve attuned to danger. Around her, passengers who had survived what should have been a catastrophic landing were ushered into secure rooms, reassured by Viper and the other F-22 pilots. But Hawk knew the truth. Safety here was only temporary. Viper approached, helmet tucked under his arm, face a mask of controlled urgency. "We've scanned all data from the plane," he said, voice low. "The sabotage was deliberate, small, precise, almost surgical. But there's more, it wasn't random. The mastermind behind this has been following you for years. Every mission, every exercise, they've been testing you, observing your patterns, predicting your reactions. And now, you're in their crosshairs again." Sarah's stomach tightened. This wasn't just about a plane anymore. It was about legacy, identity, and survival against an enemy who understood her better than she understood herself. She scanned the sky, the facility perimeter, every detail she had learned to notice over countless missions. Whoever was behind this had patience, cunning, and resources, and they had picked the wrong person to manipulate. She stepped into the command center, a room buzzing with monitors, data streams, and live feeds. The sabotage indicators were highlighted in red: microfractures in engine components, traces of foreign microcircuits, subtle tampering with hydraulic lines. Someone had designed the failure to appear natural at first glance, but Hawk saw the pattern immediately. Every anomaly screamed calculation, experience, and familiarity with military-grade aircraft. Marcus hovered nearby, tense but trusting. "Lieutenant, what now?" Hawk's eyes narrowed. "We find the source. Whoever orchestrated this, they didn't just want me to land a plane. They wanted information, attention, and to see if I could survive under pressure. We're going to give it to them, but on our terms." Viper's voice cut in. "Hawk, we've traced the digital signatures left in the sabotage attempt. The origin points to a private facility outside the state, heavily secured. Only someone with military-grade knowledge could access it." Her pulse quickened. "That's our next stop," she said. "We move now. No hesitation, no mistakes. They expect me to react. I'll act instead." The plan was simple in concept but fraught with risk. Hawk and a small team, including Viper and the F-22 pilots, would infiltrate the remote facility, neutralize the threat, and recover the evidence linking the sabotage to its mastermind. Simple in concept, impossible in execution. Every step carried the weight of lives already saved and lives still at risk. Hours later, under cover of darkness, Hawk led the team toward the target. The facility was surrounded by high walls, sensor arrays, and guards moving in precise, predictable patterns. Predictable because they believed no one could match Hawk's skill. They hadn't accounted for her legacy, her instincts honed by countless missions, by the survival of impossible odds. The team split strategically. Hawk approached from the north perimeter, silent, calculated, moving like a shadow. Viper covered the east entrance, while the other pilots took overwatch positions. Every movement was choreographed, every second accounted for. Inside the facility, Hawk found what she had feared: rows of computers, schematics, and encrypted files detailing previous sabotage attempts, tests of other operatives, meticulous records of strengths, weaknesses, and reactions. And there, at the center, was the command station, the hub from which the mastermind had controlled the sabotage that had nearly claimed her passengers' lives. Her pulse pounded as she approached the final terminal. Fingers flying over the controls, Hawk bypassed layers of encryption with skills honed from years of clandestine operations. Screens flickered with schematics of aircraft, flight paths, and dossiers, each one bearing the mark of someone who knew her past intimately. A voice echoed from the shadows, calm, almost amused. "Hawk, I wondered when you'd find me." Hawk spun, hand on her sidearm, eyes scanning the figure emerging from the darkness. The mastermind was a former operative, a shadow from her Top Gun-era missions, someone she had once considered a trusted rival. Every movement, every glance, radiated intelligence and menace. "You survived the first test," the figure said, a smirk playing across their face. "But I had to see if you could adapt, if you could handle real people, real consequences. You passed, impressively, but now the game escalates." Hawk's jaw tightened. "Your game's endangered innocent lives. I don't play games with people's lives." The figure laughed softly. "And yet here you are, alive, observant, capable, exactly what I needed to study. You'll find my fascination with you isn't personal, it's evolutionary. You're extraordinary. The test was inevitable." Her fingers tightened on the trigger. "Extraordinary doesn't give you the right to manipulate, terrorize, or kill. You're finished." Viper's voice came over the comms. "Hawk, we have perimeter containment. Move carefully." Hawk advanced, using the cover of darkness and shadows to her advantage. Every step was calculated, every breath measured. The mastermind lunged for a concealed weapon, but Hawk anticipated it, disarming them with precise, fluid movements. Years of hand-to-hand training, combined with instinct and experience, made her nearly untouchable. The mastermind fell back, stunned, realizing their advantage had been neutralized. You're not supposed to." Hawk's voice was calm, unyielding. "I'm Hawk, and I survive." With the threat contained, the F-22 pilots secured the facility, ensuring no backup forces could intervene. Hawk moved swiftly to extract the data, copying every file, every trace of evidence linking the sabotage attempts to the mastermind. Every second counted. The longer she lingered, the greater the risk. Finally, with evidence secured, Hawk stepped outside, taking in the cool night air. The F-22s hovered, engines purring softly, a reminder of allies and old camaraderie. Marcus, now visibly relieved, approached. "Lieutenant, we did it. We stopped them." Hawk's gaze was fixed on the horizon, her mind still racing. "We've stopped this attempt," she said, voice calm but measured. "But people like this, they never stop. We've bought time, that's all. The world doesn't know Hawk exists, but now they should." Viper approached, helmet under arm, respect and awe in his eyes. "Hawk, you didn't just save civilians. You took the fight to someone who thought they could manipulate a living legend. You made them pay." Hawk exhaled, a small, weary smile forming. "We made them pay, but survival is only part of it. Protecting people, stopping threats before they strike, that's the mission. That's Hawk." The boy from the plane, now safe in secure hands, watched from a distance, eyes wide. Hawk caught his gaze and nodded once, reassuringly. "You survived today," she said. "Remember that. Courage isn't about never being scared, it's about standing up when it matters most." The F-22s ascended again, breaking formation into the night sky. Hawk remained grounded for a moment, letting the wind carry the tension from her shoulders. She knew the world had seen only the surface, a pilot landing a failing plane and saving lives. What they hadn't seen were the shadows behind her, the tests, the manipulation, and the relentless pursuit of survival against calculated enemies. But Hawk had survived, and in surviving she had proven once again why her call sign wasn't just a name, it was a legacy. As the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, painting the sky with gold and crimson, Hawk turned back to the secure facility, the evidence now safely in the hands of those who could neutralize the threat. Somewhere, the mastermind, now powerless, would reconsider their next moves. And somewhere, the world would remain unaware of the legend who had saved them. For Sarah Hawk Jefferson, survival wasn't just instinct. It was identity, skill, and courage refined in the crucible of impossible circumstances. And as the F-22s disappeared into the morning light, she felt the weight of her past, the responsibility of the present, and the clarity of the future. She was Hawk. And no one, not sabotage, not enemies, not invisible threats, could ever take that away.